This is a story about a man with grease on his hands and a woman with the world at her feet. It is a story about Leo, a mechanic and a single father, whose life was a series of patched-up parts and just enough fuel to get to the next day. His universe was the size of his small garage, the scent of motor oil, and the sound of his daughter's laughter, the one engine he would do anything to keep running smoothly. And it is a story about Isabella Sterling, the chief executive officer of a corporate empire, a woman who lived in a skyscraper that scraped the clouds, but who felt as grounded as a ghost. Her world was a landscape of stock tickers, quarterly reports, and sterile boardrooms, a place where success was measured in billions, and connection was a liability. This is the story of the night their two worlds collided, not with a bang, but with the quiet, sputtering death of a $500,000 engine. It's a story about a simple act of kindness, an offer made with no expectation of reward. It's about what happens when a man who fixes things for a living meets a woman who believes everything is disposable. Can a calloused hand mend a broken heart? Can a man who barely has enough for himself show a woman who has everything what she is truly missing? This is the story of Leo and Isabella, and the night a lonely bar became the starting point for a journey neither of them could have ever predicted. Leo checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 8:47. He was already late. His daughter, Lily, was with Mrs. Gable next door, a kindness he tried not to overuse. But tonight, his last customer, a vintage pickup with a stubborn transmission, had fought him every step of the way. It was a battle of wills, and the truck had almost won. Now, his own beat-up sedan was running on fumes, the needle on the gas gauge resting firmly on E like a stubborn old man in a favorite chair. He had exactly $24.17 in his pocket, enough for a splash of gas and a carton of milk on the way home. Lily always wanted milk for her cereal. The city lights blurred past, a smear of neon and ambition that felt a world away from his life of wrenches and rags. He was a creature of tangible things. Stripped bolts, worn gaskets, the satisfying click of a part seating just right. This world of glass and light felt abstract, breakable. That was when he saw it. Pulled over on the shoulder, hazards flashing like a frantic heartbeat, was a car that didn't belong on the side of any road. It was long, black, and sleek, looking less like a vehicle and more like a predator resting in the dark. It was a machine so far out of his financial league it might as well have been a spaceship. He could just drive by. Everyone else was. Cars flowed around the disabled vehicle like a river around a stone. It was not his problem. He was late. He was low on gas. Lily was waiting. But his father's voice, gone for 10 years but still clear as a bell in his head, echoed in his mind. You don't stop helping people just because it's inconvenient, Leo. That's the only time it really counts. He sighed, a puff of weary resignation. His father had been a plumber, a man who understood how easily things could get blocked up. Leo flicked on his turn signal, the rhythmic clicking a countdown to his involvement. He pulled his rattling car onto the shoulder behind the silent, monolithic machine. Inside the obsidian car, Isabella Sterling gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white peaks in a range of frustration. Useless, she muttered, glaring at the dashboard that had gone completely dark. The car, a custom-built Sterling Vance sedan, the flagship of her company's automotive technology division, was as dead as a stone. It was supposed to be a marvel of engineering, a symphony of code and chrome. Right now, it was a very expensive, very public failure. She had already tried her roadside assistance. A cheerful, automated voice had put her on hold. The irony was a bitter pill. She, the CEO of Ethelred Innovations, the parent company of this very automotive tech, was stuck. Powerless. Her day had been a series of fires. A hostile negotiation with a supplier in Tokyo. A dressing down of her marketing team for a lackluster campaign. A tense lunch with her board of directors who questioned her aggressive expansion strategy. She had navigated it all with the icy precision she was famous for. She was the empress in her glass tower, untouchable and in control. And now this, a common, grounding, infuriating problem. She saw the headlights in her rearview mirror. A beat-up, old sedan pulling in behind her. A flicker of annoyance went through her. The last thing she needed was some good Samaritan trying to be a hero. She had systems for this. She had resources. She just needed them to work. A man got out of the car. He was wearing a faded work shirt with a name, Leo, embroidered over the pocket, and jeans stained with something dark. He moved with a kind of weary competence. His shoulders slumped but his steps certain. She rolled down her window a few inches, the barrier between her world and his. "Car trouble?" he asked. His voice was calm, not pushy. "I have it under control," she said, her tone clipped and dismissive. It was the same tone she used on underperforming executives. It usually worked. Leo just nodded, not offended. He could see the tension in her silhouette, the rigid line of her jaw. It was a look he knew well. It was the face of someone trying to hold a dozen broken pieces together with sheer force of will. "All right," he said, turning to leave. "Just wanted to make sure you were safe." He took 2 steps back toward his car. Something in his easy acceptance chipped at her armor. He was not trying to get something from her. He was not trying to impress her. He was just checking. "Wait," she said, the word escaping before she could stop it. He turned back, his expression patient. "It's dead," she admitted, the word tasting like defeat. "Completely. The whole system is down." Leo walked closer, peering at the car. He did not know the model, but he knew machines. He knew the way they breathed, the way they sighed, the way they died. "Mind if I take a look under the hood?" he asked. Sometimes these new systems, they have a simple manual override, like a hidden reset button. Isabella hesitated. Company policy was clear. No one outside the authorized service network was supposed to touch the prototype engines. It was a security risk, a liability. But the automated voice was still playing terrible music in her ear, and the city felt miles away. "Fine," she said, popping the hood with a lever. "But I doubt you will find anything." Leo felt a small smile touch his lips. He had heard that before. It was the universal anthem of people who understood balance sheets better than they understood engines. He propped the hood open and a small light came on, illuminating a maze of wires and sealed black boxes. It looked more like a server farm than a car engine. There was no dipstick, no battery terminals visible, nothing familiar. It was designed to keep people like him out. "They sure don't make it easy," he murmured to himself. He leaned in, his nose an inch from the casing. He was not looking for a part he recognized. He was listening, feeling. He ran his hand gently over the main power conduit, feeling for heat, for the ghost of a current. Nothing. "The problem with these all-in-one systems," he said, thinking aloud, "is they're like a house with only one fuse. One little surge, and the whole place goes dark." Isabella watched him from the driver's seat, a strange feeling stirring in her. He was not intimidated by the technology. He looked at the 6-figure engine with the same focused curiosity a child might give a new puzzle. He was touching her car, a piece of her empire, with dirty, calloused hands, and for some reason, it felt right. Leo followed a thick bundle of wires back toward the firewall. Tucked away, almost as an afterthought, was a small, unassuming plastic box. It had a single warning label, a lightning bolt symbol. "There you are," he whispered. He used his thumbnail to pry the cover off. Inside was a series of blade fuses, but also a single red button. It was not in any manual. It was a failsafe the engineers put in for themselves during testing. Panic button. He looked back at Isabella. This might make a loud noise. He pressed the button. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a loud thump and a cascade of clicking relays, the car whirred back to life. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, the headlights blazed, and the engine hummed with a steady, powerful thrum. Leo closed the small box, clipped the cover back on, and gently lowered the hood until it clicked shut. He wiped his hands on a rag he pulled from his back pocket. Isabella sat in stunned silence. The automated voice on her phone was still asking her to please continue to hold. She ended the call. She got out of the car and walked toward him. The engine purred between them. "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice stripped of its earlier iciness. "Just a hard reset," Leo said with a shrug. "Sometimes you just have to turn it off and on again. Doesn't matter if it's a computer or a car. Or a person, I guess." He looked her in the eyes, and for the first time she felt truly seen. Not as a CEO, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a person on the side of a road with a problem. "Thank you," she said, reaching into her purse. "I insist on paying you for your time. What do I owe you?" She pulled out her wallet, a sleek leather thing filled with platinum cards. Money was the language she understood. It was clean. It was simple. It solved problems. Leo held up a hand. "Nothing." Isabella paused. "Excuse me?" "You don't owe me anything," he repeated. "You were stuck. I helped. That's all." He gave her a small, tired smile. "Just pay it forward sometime." He saw the confusion on her face. It was a look he imagined she did not wear often. In her world, everything had a price. Every action was a transaction. His refusal was a disruption to her entire operating system. "I have to get home to my daughter," he said, turning to leave for the second time. "You have a good night. Drive safe." He got back into his old, rattling car, started it up, and pulled away, the taillights disappearing into the stream of traffic. Isabella stood alone on the shoulder of the road, the powerful hum of her resurrected car, a stark contrast to the silence Leo had left behind. She held her wallet in her hand, the useless cards suddenly feeling like foreign objects. He had refused payment. He had solved a problem her own multi-billion-dollar corporation could not, and he had asked for nothing in return. It was illogical, inefficient. It went against every rule of business and survival she had ever known. And it was the most intriguing thing that had happened to her in years. She looked down at her hands, then at the faint, greasy fingerprint his thumb had left on the pristine black hood of her car. She did not wipe it away. The next evening, Isabella Sterling did something she never did. She left work at 6 o'clock. She walked out of a meeting about third-quarter projections, leaving her executive team staring in stunned silence. She did not go to the charity gala she was supposed to attend or the networking dinner with the Swiss bankers. Instead, she drove. She found the small, unassuming garage from the logo on his work shirt. Leo's Auto Repair. Honest work for honest prices. It was a small, brick building, tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. It looked like it had been there forever, a relic from a different time. The garage was closed, the bay doors pulled down. A simple, hand-painted sign said the hours were 9 to 5. She felt a pang of disappointment. She was not sure what she had planned to do. Thank him again? Force him to take the money? She just knew she had to see him again. His simple act of integrity had lodged in her mind like a piece of code she could not debug. On a whim, she went into the bakery next door. The smell of yeast and sugar was warm and comforting, a stark contrast to the sterile, air-conditioned world she inhabited. An older woman with flour on her apron smiled at her. "What can I get for you, dear?" "I'm looking for the man who runs the garage next door," Isabella said, feeling strangely out of place in her tailored suit. "Leo." "Ah, Leo." The woman's face brightened. "A good man. He's usually gone by this time. Has a little girl, Lily. Always picks her up right after he closes up." "Do you know where he lives?" Isabella asked and then immediately felt foolish. It was too forward. The woman just smiled. "They live in the apartment above the shop. The entrance is around back." She leaned in conspiratorially. "He loves my cinnamon rolls. Just so you know." Isabella bought a box of 6 warm cinnamon rolls, the sweet, sticky scent filling her luxury car. She drove around to the back alley. A rickety-looking metal staircase led up to a second-floor apartment. A single light was on in the window. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, the box of pastries on the passenger seat. What was she doing here? This was not a business deal. There was no angle, no leverage. It was personal, a territory she had long since abandoned. She thought of the men she usually dated. Investment bankers, rival CEOs, men who saw her as a merger opportunity. Their conversations were a dance of power and posture. With Leo, there had been no dance. Just a simple human connection. It was like switching from a dull knife to a sharp one. The cut was cleaner, more honest. Taking a deep breath, she got out of the car, carrying the box of cinnamon rolls like a peace offering. She walked up the creaking metal stairs, each step echoing in the quiet alley. She knocked on the door. Inside, Leo was on the floor, deep in a game of Go Fish with Lily. The small apartment was tidy but worn. The furniture was mismatched, the rug was faded, but it was filled with a warmth that her sprawling penthouse lacked. Framed crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. "Do you have any dragons?" Lily asked, her voice full of hope. "Go fish, little bug," Leo said, laughing. The knock on the door startled them both. Leo rarely had visitors. He opened the door and his eyes widened in surprise. It was her, the woman from the side of the road. She was standing on his doorstep, looking just as out of place and just as beautiful as she had the night before. She was holding a box from the bakery downstairs. "Hi," she said, her voice softer than he remembered. "Hi," he replied, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This is a surprise. I wanted to thank you again," Isabella said, holding out the box. "Properly. You really didn't have to do that," he said, but he took the box. The smell of cinnamon filled the air. "Daddy, who is it?" Lily's small voice piped up from behind him. Leo stepped aside. "Lily, this is... I'm sorry, I never got your name." "Isabella," she said, her eyes finding the small girl with big, curious eyes. "Isabella," Leo repeated. "This is my daughter, Lily." "Are you the lady with the broken spaceship?" Lily asked. Isabella laughed, a genuine, unforced sound that surprised them both. "Yes, I suppose I am. My daddy can fix anything," Lily said with absolute certainty. "I can see that," Isabella said, her gaze shifting to Leo. An awkward silence fell, the kind that happens when two different worlds are trying to find a common language. "Well," Isabella said, taking a small step back, "I just wanted to drop those off. I'll let you get back to your evening." "Wait," Leo said, the word echoing her own from the night before. "Don't go. Would you like to come in? We were just about to have some of these for dessert." He held up the box. It was a simple offer, but it felt momentous. He was inviting her into his world. Isabella looked from his open, honest face to the warm light of the apartment behind him. For the first time in a long time, she made a decision that was not based on logic or strategy. It was based on a feeling. "I'd like that very much," she said. She stepped across the threshold, leaving the world of lonely empire behind and entering the small, warm kingdom of a man who knew how to fix more than just cars. Over the next few weeks, an unlikely routine began to form. Isabella would find reasons to be in Leo's neighborhood around closing time. A fabricated meeting, a sudden craving for baked goods. She would stop by the garage and they would talk. She learned about his late wife, Emily, and the quiet grief he still carried, a weight as constant and familiar as the wrench in his hand. He spoke of her not with soaring sadness, but with a gentle fondness that made Isabella feel the shape of the hole she had left in his life. He learned about the relentless pressure of her job, the isolation at the top. She described board meetings like chess games where every piece was a person's career. She never complained. She just stated it as a fact of her life, like describing the weather. Leo found her world fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. "It sounds like you're constantly trying to patch 100 leaks at once," he told her one afternoon, as he tightened a hose clamp on an engine. "Must be exhausting." "It is," she admitted, the confession so simple and direct it stunned her. She had never said that to anyone. One day, she was watching him diagnose a problem with a car's complex electrical system. Her own engineers would have used diagnostic computers and flowcharts. Leo just closed his eyes and listened to the engine's hum, his head tilted. "The rhythm's off," he murmured. It's like a drummer missing a beat every fourth measure. It's not the battery. It's the alternator struggling to keep up. He saw the complex, interconnected systems of a car not as a series of parts, but as a single living thing. A body. An idea began to form in Isabella's mind. It was a wild, illogical, and potentially career-ending idea. Her company was on the verge of launching its most ambitious project yet, a revolutionary logistics software called Project Chimera. It was designed to manage global shipping networks with unprecedented efficiency. But it had a bug, a ghost in the machine. For months, her top engineers, men and women with PhDs from the best universities in the world, had been stumped. The system would inexplicably crash under heavy load. Data packets would vanish. It was a catastrophic failure waiting to happen, threatening to cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. Her team saw it as a coding problem. They were lost in the weeds of algorithms and subroutines. But listening to Leo, Isabella started to see it differently. He did not see the weeds. He saw the whole garden. He listened for the rhythm. The next day, she arrived at the garage in her work attire, a stark contrast to her usual casual visits. She looked nervous, a state Leo had never seen her in. "Leo," she began, dispensing with the usual pleasantries. "I have a proposition for you. It's unconventional." He wiped his hands on a rag and gave her his full attention. "I have a problem at my company," she explained. "A big one. A systemic problem that my best people can't solve. They're too close to it. They only see the individual lines of code. I need someone who can see the whole engine." She took a breath. "I want to hire you. As a consultant." Leo stared at her, then laughed. "Isabella, I fix cars. I don't even own a computer that was made in this decade. What could I possibly do?" "You listen," she said with fierce intensity. "You understand that when one part is failing, it puts stress on everything else. You don't just replace the broken part, you figure out why it broke. That's what I need." She named a consulting fee that made Leo's head spin. It was more than he made in a year, in 2 years. He thought of Lily, of the leaky roof, of the constant, grinding worry about money that was the background noise of his life. But he also thought of the men in suits he imagined worked at her company. Men with degrees and pedigrees. He would be a fish not just out of water, but on a different planet. "They'll eat me alive," he said, the doubt clear in his voice. "I won't let them," Isabella said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Leo, please. I trust you." Trust. It was a word she wielded like a weapon in the boardroom. But here, with him, it was an offering, a plea. He looked at her, at the formidable CEO who was asking a simple mechanic for help, and saw the vulnerability beneath the power. "Okay," he said, the word feeling bigger than any he had ever spoken. "Okay, Isabella. I'll do it." The first day Leo walked into the headquarters of Ethelred Innovations, he felt like he had stepped through a portal into the future. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and gleaming glass. Employees in sharp, tailored suits moved with a quiet, purposeful hum, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. Leo stood in the middle of it all, wearing his cleanest work boots, a simple button-down shirt, and the same jeans he always wore. He felt like a smudge on a pristine painting. Isabella met him at the security desk, her presence instantly parting the sea of employees. Her smile was reassuring, but he could see the slight tension in her eyes. She was taking a huge risk, and they both knew it. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," he said, trying for a confidence he did not feel. She led him to the top floor, to the nerve center of Project Chimera. The room was a circular space with a 360-degree view of the city. A dozen of the brightest minds in the tech world were huddled around a holographic display, arguing in a language of acronyms and jargon that was completely foreign to Leo. Isabella clapped her hands, and the room fell silent. "Everyone," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "This is Leo. He's joining us as a special consultant on Chimera." A man stepped forward. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a look of smug superiority etched onto his face. This was Julian Vance, the vice president of strategy and the lead on Project Chimera. A consultant? Julian said, his eyes raking over Leo's boots with unconcealed disdain. And his credentials are from which university, Isabella? The air in the room grew thick with tension. The other engineers exchanged smirk-filled glances. His credentials, Isabella said, her voice as cold and sharp as ice, are that he has my complete confidence. He is here to provide a fresh perspective. You will all give him your full cooperation. Is that understood? Julian gave a tight, condescending smile. Of course, we're always open to fresh perspectives, he turned to Leo. Well, Leo, the data stream is experiencing a recursive cascade failure under high-volume stress tests. The packet loss is nonlinear. What are your initial thoughts? He had thrown down the gauntlet. It was a clear, public challenge, designed to humiliate Leo and undermine Isabella. Leo felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. He did not understand half of those words. He looked at the swirling, complex hologram of data streams. It was just noise. He met Julian's mocking gaze. He could fold. He could admit he was out of his depth and walk away. Or he could be honest. My initial thought, Leo said, his voice quiet but steady, is that I have no idea what you just said, but I'd like to see the system, not the picture of it. The actual machine. A few of the younger engineers snickered. Julian scoffed. The machine is a network of servers on 3 different continents. It's not a Ford Pinto you can pop the hood on. There's a main hub though, right? Leo pressed. A place where it all comes together? A central server room? Well, yes, in the sub-basement, Julian said, exasperated. But the problem is in the code, not the hardware. Maybe, Leo said, but sometimes you can hear a problem better than you can see it. Isabella stepped in. George from facilities will take you, Leo. Julian, give him full access. Her word was final. Julian shot Leo a look of pure venom before turning back to his team. The message was clear. This was not over. An older man with a kind, weathered face and a maintenance uniform stepped forward. Leo, I'm George. Follow me. As they walked toward the elevator, George gave Leo a wry smile. Don't mind Julian. He's got a PhD in being a pain in the neck. Got his degree from Harvard, but he couldn't change a light bulb if his life depended on it. Leo felt a sliver of relief. He had found an ally. That night, Leo went home feeling defeated. He had spent hours in the server room, a cold, humming space filled with racks of anonymous black boxes. George had been kind, explaining the basics, but Leo felt more lost than ever. The scale of it was overwhelming. He sat at his small kitchen table, staring at a printout of the system architecture that looked like a plate of spaghetti. Lily came and sat next to him, pushing a drawing across the table. It was a picture of him standing tall next to a giant, sad-looking robot. In the drawing, Leo was holding a wrench, and the robot had a tear falling from its eye. "What's this little bug?" he asked, his voice tired. "That's you," she said, pointing with a small finger. "And that's the sad computer at the lady's work. It's sad because it has a tummy ache." Leo looked at the drawing. Tummy ache. It was so simple, so childish. But it sparked something. When a car's engine rattled, it was because of an imbalance. Pressure buildup. A blockage. The system was fighting itself. What if the Chimera problem was not a flaw in the code, but a flaw in the design? What if it was getting a tummy ache? He looked at Lily's drawing again. She had drawn little squiggly lines going into the robot's mouth, and a big, tangled knot in its stomach. "You're a genius, you know that?" he said, hugging her tightly. He went back to the printout, but this time he was not looking at the code or the components. He was looking at the flow. The data came in from all over the world, hitting the central processor all at once. It was like trying to force a river through a garden hose. The system was choking on the information. The engineers had tried to solve it by widening the hose, optimizing the code for faster processing. But maybe the answer was not to widen the hose. Maybe the answer was to build a dam. The days that followed were a quiet battle of wills. Leo spent his time with George in the guts of the building, tracing conduits, mapping server connections, and asking simple, maddening questions that the engineers dismissed. Where does the heat go? What happens if this power supply flickers for just a millisecond? Why does this cable run all the way over there instead of straight down? Julian and his team openly mocked him, calling him the janitor behind his back. They would deliberately use impenetrable jargon in his presence, trying to force him out. Leo ignored them. He was not there to win their approval. He was there to listen to the machine. Isabella supported him, but he could see the strain it was putting on her. She was facing a full-blown insurrection from her top executive. Her board was getting nervous. She was staking her reputation on a blue-collar mechanic. One evening, she found him on the rooftop helipad, looking out over the city. The wind whipped at his hair. He looked tired but determined. "They think I'm a fool," he said without turning around. "I don't," she said, coming to stand beside him. The city lights spread out below them like a fallen constellation. "Why are you doing this, Isabella?" he asked, finally looking at her. "Risking so much for a guy who smells like oil and coffee?" "Because," she said, her voice soft but firm, "for the first time in a long time, I'm not thinking about the risk. I'm thinking about the possibility." They stood in silence for a long time, the chasm of their different worlds shrinking in the shared quiet. "My father was a watchmaker," Isabella said suddenly, the confession surprising even herself. "Not a rich one. We lived in a tiny apartment above his shop. It smelled of metal and cleaning solution." Leo looked at her, seeing a glimpse of the woman behind the CEO. "He could spend hours," she continued, "just listening to the tiny gears. He said you could tell everything about a watch not by looking at its face, but by the rhythm of its heart. He loved his work so much he never really saw anything else. Including me." Her voice was not filled with self-pity, just a quiet, factual sadness. "He died and I inherited the shop. I sold it and used the money to go to business school. I swore I would build something so big, so powerful, that I would never be small or overlooked again." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "And I did. And now I live in a glass box in the sky, more alone than I ever was in that tiny apartment." Leo did not know what to say, so he just stood there with her. He understood loss. He understood loneliness. He knew they were not problems you could fix with a wrench or a board meeting. They were just states of being you learned to carry. "My wife, Emily," he said, his voice thick with memory. "She used to say that I wasn't just fixing cars. I was fixing people's lives, getting them to their jobs, to their families." She saw the connection in everything. He paused. "When she got sick, it was the one thing I couldn't fix, and I felt like the biggest failure in the world." They shared their pasts, their quiet pains, on that rooftop. Two lonely people from opposite ends of the universe, finding a common ground in their shared brokenness. "You're not a failure, Leo," Isabella said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're the most capable man I've ever met." In that moment, under the vast, indifferent sky, the line between employer and consultant, between rich and poor, vanished completely. There was just a man and a woman. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently tucked a windswept strand of hair behind her ear. His calloused fingers brushed against her skin. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure, unshielded connection. They leaned in, the space between them shrinking, their eyes locked. Then the door to the rooftop burst open. It was Julian. "Isabella, we have a problem," he said, his voice laced with a triumphant urgency. "The primary server just crashed. It's a total system failure. Chimera is dead in the water." The moment was shattered. The spell was broken. Isabella straightened up, her CEO mask snapping back into place. "What happened? What happened?" Julian said, shooting a venomous glare at Leo. "Is that we've wasted 3 weeks on this distraction. The launch is in 48 hours. We have to scrap the current build and revert to the old stable system. We've failed. The crisis had arrived. This was it. The point of no return. The Chimera team was in a state of controlled panic. The holographic display showed a flat line. Red warning signals pulsed on every monitor. The project, years in the making and worth a fortune, was bleeding out on the floor of the most advanced conference room in the city. Julian was in his element orchestrating the retreat. I want a full rollback to the legacy software. It's clunky, but it's stable. We'll tell the board we're delaying the launch to implement new features. He was spinning the disaster, saving his own skin. Leo stood at the edge of the room, watching. He felt George's solid presence beside him. They're giving up, George murmured. Just like they always do when it gets really tough. Leo looked at Isabella. Her face was a pale, stressed mask. Her advisors were swarming her, urging her to sign off on Julian's plan. It was the safe move, the logical move, cut their losses. But Leo had seen the problem. He had heard the engine stutter. He knew what was wrong. He walked into the center of the room. Don't do it, he said. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to him. Julian let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Excuse me? Did the mechanic say something? You're not fixing the problem, Leo said, his voice gaining strength. You're just putting a smaller, older engine in a race car. It'll run, but you'll lose the race. He turned to the main screen. George, can you pull up the system architecture? The physical one. The blueprints for the server room. George, without waiting for Julian's approval, tapped a few commands on a tablet. The dead hologram was replaced by a three-dimensional rendering of the server farm in the basement. Your problem isn't the code, Leo said, pointing at the diagram. It's the plumbing. A ripple of confused murmurs went through the engineers. You're pouring all the data from all over the world into one central intake pipe, Leo explained, using his hands to illustrate the flow. It's too much, too fast. The processor gets overwhelmed. It chokes. And the system crashes to protect itself. It's not a bug. It's a safety feature. That's a ridiculous oversimplification, Julian sneered. This is a quantum data processing issue, not a leaky faucet. It's exactly a leaky faucet, Leo shot back, his patience finally snapping. You keep trying to invent a new kind of water instead of just adding another pipe. He turned to the diagram again. Look, all the data comes in here. He pointed to the main server rack. But the primary cooling system is over here. The system overheats from the processing demand before the coolant can even compensate. It's a design flaw. You've built an engine that can't breathe. And what? Julian asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Is your brilliant solution? Oh, great master of the mechanical arts. Leo took a deep breath. This was his one shot. You build a reservoir, he said. A holding tank. Right here, he indicated an empty space on the server room floor. You install a secondary, smaller server bank. A buffer. All the data flows into the buffer first. It holds the data, cools it, sorts it, and then feeds it to the main processor at a rate it can handle. You're not changing the code. You're just regulating the flow. He was describing a simple mechanical concept. A surge tank. Capacitor. It was elegant. It was simple. And to the engineers in the room, it was heresy. That's insane, one of the lead coders said. It would take weeks to integrate a new hardware layer. No, it wouldn't, George spoke up, his voice cutting through the doubt. There's a decommissioned server bank from the old data wing just sitting in storage. The cabling is already there. We could have it physically installed in a few hours. Julian looked horrified. His carefully constructed world of pure code was being invaded by the messy reality of hardware and plumbing. This is the most idiotic idea I have ever heard, he declared, turning to Isabella. Are you seriously going to listen to this? Are you going to bet this entire company on the harebrained theory of a garage monkey? The insult hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Every eye was on Isabella. This was her moment of truth. To side with her credentialed, experienced, and catastrophically wrong vice president. or to side with the humble, unproven mechanic who had looked her in the eye and promised nothing but his honest effort. She looked at Julian, her face unreadable. Then she looked at Leo, who met her gaze with quiet confidence. He was not asking her to believe in his idea. He was asking her to believe in him. Isabella Sterling walked to the head of the room, her presence silencing all debate. She looked at Julian, her eyes like chips of flint. "Julian," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute command. "For the last 6 months, you and your team of geniuses have been telling me you were 2 weeks away from a solution. You have failed. Your credentials have failed. Your models have failed." She turned to the rest of the room. "Leo's idea is the first one that makes any practical sense. It's the first one that doesn't just look at the numbers on the screen but at the machine as a whole." She took a deep breath and staked her entire career on a single decision. "We are not rolling back. We are implementing Leo's solution. George, get your team. Julian, you and your engineers will write the code to integrate the new buffer server. You have 48 hours until the launch. Make it happen." Julian stood, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "This is professional suicide, Isabella. When this blows up in your face, I'll be the first one to say I told you so." "If it blows up in my face," she replied, her voice dangerously calm, "I'll be the one to answer for it. But if it works, you will be the first one to thank him." It was a public declaration of war. She had chosen her side. She had defended the man they all scorned, and in doing so had bound her fate to his. The room buzzed with a new, frantic energy. The retreat was over. The charge had begun. Leo just looked at Isabella, a feeling of overwhelming gratitude washing over him. She had not just backed his idea. She had defended his worth. For the next 36 hours, Ethelred Tower was a hive of activity. George and his maintenance crew worked with a speed and efficiency that stunned the software engineers. They were men who understood the physical world, and they moved with purpose, running cables, mounting the old server rack, and transforming Leo's idea from a theory into a tangible reality. Leo was in the thick of it, not directing but helping. He was hauling servers with George, helping a young engineer diagnose a power supply issue, his hands getting dirty. He was back in his element. Julian and his team, sullen and resentful, were forced to code the interface. They worked with a kind of passive-aggressive slowness, convinced they were documenting a spectacular failure. Isabella never left. She had a cot brought into her office, surviving on coffee and the electric tension in the air. She was a constant, calming presence, a general walking the lines before the final battle. Finally, with 12 hours to spare, it was done. The physical work was finished. The new code was uploaded. The system was back online. The Chimera team gathered once more in the conference room. The atmosphere was thick with dread and anticipation. "It's ready," Julian said, his tone flat. He was already distancing himself from the outcome. "Run the final stress test," Isabella commanded. "Maximum load. Everything we have." An engineer initiated the sequence. On the holographic display, the data stream began to flow. It started as a trickle, then a river, then a flood. They were throwing everything at it, the equivalent of the entire shipping traffic of North America all at once. This was the point where it had always crashed before. The room was utterly silent. No one breathed. The data hit the new buffer server. The display showed the reservoir filling up, the load being managed, sorted, and then fed into the main processor in a smooth, steady, brilliant blue stream. The processor's temperature gauge, which had always spiked into the red, held steady. The data packet count remained at 100%. No loss.
No crashes. No errors.
It was working. It was working flawlessly. Minutes ticked by. The system held. It did not just hold. It thrived. The efficiency metrics were 15% higher than they had ever projected. A slow, hesitant clap started from one of the younger engineers. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room, except for Julian, erupted in applause and shouts of relief and disbelief. They were not just clapping for the success of the project. They were clapping for the man who had saved it. Leo stood next to Isabella, a tired, relieved smile on his face. He felt her hand find his, her fingers lacing through his. It was a small, quiet gesture in the midst of the celebration, but it felt more significant than any of it. Julian Vance stood alone, his face pale. He had been proven wrong in the most public and spectacular way possible. He looked at Leo, his expression a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. The next morning, Isabella called an all-hands meeting in the company auditorium. Everyone was there, from the board of directors to the mailroom clerks. She stood on the stage, Leo by her side. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn for the last 2 days, and he had never looked more out of place or more powerful. As you all know, Isabella began, her voice amplified throughout the hall. Project Chimera launched 1 hour ago. It was a flawless success. The room burst into applause. This success, she continued, raising a hand for silence, is not due to our existing models or our traditional ways of thinking. It is due to the vision of one man. She turned to Leo. For weeks, many of you, including some of my senior staff, dismissed this man. You judged him by his clothes, by his lack of a fancy degree, by his calloused hands. You saw a mechanic. You saw a janitor. You saw someone who didn't belong. A wave of uncomfortable shifting went through the crowd. But what I saw, Isabella said, her voice ringing with passion, was a genius, a man who understands that the most complex systems are built on simple truths. A man whose integrity and honesty are more valuable than any line on a resume. This company was founded on innovation. But somewhere along the way, we started to believe that innovation only comes from people who look and sound just like us. We became arrogant. I became arrogant. Leo reminded us that true genius can be found anywhere. It is our job to be smart enough to recognize it. She paused, letting the words sink in. Therefore, I am creating a new position, head of the Practical Innovation Division, a department dedicated to looking at all our problems from a different angle, to question our assumptions, and to find simple solutions to complex problems. A department based not on credentials, but on results. She looked directly at Leo. And I have offered the position to Leo. He will report directly to me. A gasp went through the auditorium. It was an unprecedented move. Leo has not yet given me his answer, Isabella finished. But I hope he accepts, because this company needs him. I need him. She had laid it all bare. Her professional need, and beneath it a hint of something more. Leo stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding. He looked out at the sea of faces, all staring at him. He was just a guy who fixed cars. But he was also the man who had saved their company. I'm not a public speaker, he began, his voice rough, and I don't know anything about running a division. But I do know one thing. My whole life I've worked on my own terms, with honesty, with integrity. If I take this job, that's the only way I know how to do it. He looked at Isabella, a silent communication passing between them. So yes, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. I accept. The applause was deafening. Later that evening, the tower was quiet. The celebrations were over. Leo found Isabella in her office, staring out at the city lights. You didn't have to do all that, he said softly, coming to stand beside her. The public announcement. Yes, I did, she said, turning to face him. Her eyes were shining. They needed to see what I see. And what do you see? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I see a man who came into my life and fixed more than just my car, she said, her corporate armor completely gone. You fixed me, Leo. You reminded me of what's real. The space between them was charged with everything they had been through. The shared vulnerability, the public stand, the quiet victory. Isabella, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I came here to do a job, but somewhere along the way it became about more than that. It became about you. I'm terrified, she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. This feeling, it's not logical. It's not part of the plan. I know, he said, taking her hands in his. His were rough and calloused. Hers were smooth and manicured. They fit together perfectly. Good things usually aren't part of the plan. They just show up when you need them most. Like a woman with a broken-down car on the side of the road. What are we doing, Leo? She asked, her gaze searching his. We're not running away, he said simply. We're building something. Something real. He did not wait for an answer. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a hesitant, questioning kiss. It was a kiss of certainty, of arrival. It was a kiss that sealed the union of two worlds. A kiss that promised a new beginning. In that moment, high above the city in the glass tower, the lonely empress and the humble genius were just a man and a woman, finally home. A month later, Leo's life was unrecognizably different, yet fundamentally the same. He had an office next to Isabella's, but he spent most of his time in the workshop he had George build in the sub-basement, a space that smelled comfortingly of oil and metal. He wore his own clothes to work, and his official title on the door simply said, Leo, head of making things work. He was still a father first. He left every day at 5 o'clock sharp to pick up Lily from school. His relationship with Isabella was no longer a secret. They were a quiet, steady presence in each other's lives. One Saturday morning, the sun streamed into the kitchen of Isabella's formerly sterile penthouse. It was no longer a minimalist showpiece. It was a home. A half-finished puzzle was on the coffee table. Lily's crayon drawings were proudly displayed on the state-of-the-art refrigerator, held up by whimsical animal magnets. The air smelled not of expensive air freshener, but of pancakes. Leo was at the stove, flipping a pancake, a smudge of flour on his cheek. Lily was sitting at the vast marble island, carefully pouring syrup into a small bowl. Isabella was leaning against the counter, watching them, a soft, genuine smile on her face. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and yoga pants, and she had never looked more beautiful to him. You're going to use all the syrup, little bug, Leo teased. Pancakes need a swimming pool, not a puddle, Lily replied with the unassailable logic of an 8-year-old. Isabella laughed, a sound that was now common in this apartment. She walked over to Leo and wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. You're burning it, she murmured into his ear. I'm caramelizing it, he corrected, expertly flipping the slightly too dark pancake onto a plate. It's a feature, not a bug. She kissed the flour smudge on his cheek. Whatever you say, Mr. Head of Making Things Work. They stood there for a moment, a family, not one born of tradition or expectation, but one forged in a chance encounter, built on trust, and sealed with a simple, shared breakfast. Later that day, Leo had a surprise. He took Isabella and Lily down to his old garage, which he had kept. He told Isabella he had a project to show her. In the center of the garage, covered by a tarp, was a car. What's this? She asked. With a flourish, Leo pulled off the tarp. Underneath was not a sleek, modern machine, but a vintage car, a beautiful old convertible from the 1960s. He had spent the last month restoring it. The body was painted a deep, classic blue, and the chrome gleamed. Oh, Leo, Isabella breathed. It's beautiful. I figured we needed a car that was more about the journey than the destination, he said. One with a soul. You can't just press a button to fix it. You have to listen to it. He opened the passenger door for her. In the glove compartment, he had placed a small velvet box. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was not a diamond ring, but a custom-made watch. The face was simple and elegant, but on the back, he had engraved a tiny, perfect image of a wrench and a crown, side by side. My father, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He would have been proud of you, Leo said gently. You built an empire, Isabella, but you never lost your heart. You just stored it away for safekeeping. She looked at him, her eyes full of love and gratitude. This was his grand gesture, not a display of wealth, but a display of understanding. He had not just seen her for who she was. He had seen her for who she had been and who she could be. "I have something for you, too," she said, pulling a small, folded piece of paper from her pocket. It was a deed. He had been renting the garage and the apartment above it for years. She had bought the entire building. It was his. He looked at the paper, then at her, speechless. "A king needs his own castle," she said with a smile, "even if he prefers to spend his time in the Queen's." Lily, who had been patiently waiting in the back seat of the convertible, piped up, "Are we going to go for a ride in our new family car?" Leo and Isabella looked at each other over the gleaming hood of the car, and then at the small girl who had seen their future long before they had. "Yes, little bug," Leo said, his voice full of a joy he once thought was lost forever. "We are." And so, the story of the mechanic and the CEO found its true beginning. They had learned that the most complex problems often have the simplest solutions. They discovered that true wealth is not measured in stock prices or bank accounts, but in shared laughter and quiet moments of understanding. Their love was a testament to the idea that a person's worth is not defined by their title or their tax bracket, but by the integrity of their character and the kindness in their heart. It proved that sometimes the most revolutionary innovation is simply daring to connect with another human being, to see past the labels and the armor, and to find the common ground where two different worlds can join to build something new, something real, something lasting. The smallest acts of kindness can, indeed, lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. They can repair a broken engine, mend a broken heart, and chart a course for a future more beautiful than any blueprint could ever design.